We are live. Good. It works. It works. Technology is a thing. Good evening, everyone. Well, good evening for me. It's kind of good. What is it, morning for you, Shana?
Yeah, 10 a.m. here in Los Angeles. My day is halfway through. I've been up for a few doing some things.
Oh, well, that's terrible. You need to go for a nap.
I'd like to.
Everyone, welcome to the slightly delayed this week edition of a Paratrooper and a Yogi walk into a bar with my co-host Shana Meyerson, the limb bender from Los Angeles. Yeah, we have our weekly chat here. We talk about all things Middle East, anti-Semitism, all those related issues. And apologies for the 2-day delay for this week. Unfortunately, I was somewhat unwell on Monday with a sore head, so I went to bed. And Shana told me off and scolded me and told me that I had to come and talk to you guys on Wednesday instead. So here we are. Yeah, so poor diary management on my part. So here we are, though. It's up and running. My co-host is right here in Los Angeles. She is Shana Meyerson. She's here on Substack. You can find her scribings, which are great fun, and some really good insight into the Middle East, anti-Semitism, all that stuff. And of course, on YouTube, she has the Yoga of War podcast.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I just walked into the bar and there he is, the paratrooping penman himself, Andrew Fox, co-host of the Brink podcast, and Mr. Andrew Fox on Substack, and now again on X. And before we start, I just want to take a quick moment for the last two remaining hostages. I just want to show that, like, for all of the Israel demonstrations that I've attended, like, this is the poster that I actually carried. Of all the people, of 251 hostages, Ron is now the last Israeli hostage. As hopefully you know, there's one other hostage who's a Thai agricultural worker, Suthi Sak. Rintalak. Sorry if I butcher that name, but you know I butcher everyone's names, unfortunately. Ron literally was receiving treatment at a hospital, left the hospital to run into the line of fire, was murdered by Hamas on October 7th. Suthi Sak, an innocent agricultural worker who had nothing to do with the war, also abducted by Hamas and murdered. So I just want to say, please don't take off your ribbons. We have to get them home. That being said, Andrew, here we are at the bar. Give me some light bar fare. What would you like to talk about today?
I have to say, this does give the impression that we're like the two most boring people in the world who just go to bars and just like bore people to death about the Middle East. You know, honestly, we are kind of fun in real life, but it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick. So I think we're going to start with it. We were kind of looking at various things to talk about today, and there's a sort of loose paradigm emerging, I think, after the kind of, well, I'd say the ceasefire in Gaza. It's not a ceasefire. Everyone's still shooting at everyone else, but the airstrikes have stopped and the maneuver has stopped. So by maneuver, that's a specific military term, meaning, you know, your forces are kind of on the ground trying to achieve an effect by moving from position A to B whilst covered by fire from something else. So the maneuver has stopped, and there's kind of what we'd call ground holding on the Israeli side with that yellow line that you've probably read about. But both sides are still shooting at each other over the yellow line. The Israelis have done some limited tank maneuver. So yeah, it's not really a ceasefire. It's kind of a fire reduction more than anything else.
Otherwise known as a hudna if you happen to be on the other team.
Is that an American term? Is that your LA gang speak?
Yeah.
It's like having a conversation with an NWA record. But the the interest globally has sort of died down now, and there's a phenomenon that's come from this. I think it's really interesting, and it proves beyond all question that the Palestine stuff was never about ceasefires or actually anything about Palestine or Gaza, and it was a veiled attack on the West more than anything. And that is that these protests are still going. You know, the bombs are not falling. Well, they are, but they're not in any way comparable to how it was when we were in that high intensity warfighting phase. And yet the protests still crack on, and it's about, occupation, all this bullshit. And look, this is the deal that Trump has negotiated, and this is the deal he's forced on Israel. This is where we are. I spoke to the IDF this week. They fully expect to resume combat operations in due course. Which is really interesting because we then run around the same problem set as what does the end of that look like? What tactics do you use? Are you in a 20-year counterinsurgency campaign, or are you just going in and killing as many Hamas members as you can? And even then, if you do that, what does the end look like? So we're around that problem set once again if that war does resume at full scale. But we're also seeing a kind of wider thing around this as well, and that is the Trump White House's kind of Middle East outreach program, if we can call it that, where Mr. Trump got the ceasefire in Gaza. Well, we'll call it what we have to. Ceasefire, such as it is, he got that essentially through bribing Qatar and Turkey to get Hamas to release the hostages. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood reached the headlines yesterday. Mr. Trump announced he was banning them. The glaring omission in that executive order was, well, the two glaring omissions were Qatar and Turkey. They weren't mentioned at all. And given that they are the fountainhead of the Muslim Brotherhood operations around the world, that is a kind of serious omission. And I had a conversation earlier today where it doesn't look like that ban is going to amount to very much at all. There's already huge pushback in certain areas of the United States. It feels a bit more performative than anything else. But they've had brilliant bribes. They must have been utterly delighted with the outcome of the Gaza war. Turkey's getting F-35s in due course. Qatar have that incredible standing that they've created for themselves in terms of the positioning they've made for themselves as a kind of global negotiator, which actually they've written into their constitution now, which is really interesting.
How so?
They've said, look, we are a global negotiator. We're neutral. We'll negotiate anyone who wants to be negotiated. Negotiation, but are us. That's actually in the Qatar.
When you say that this is written into their constitution, is this a new constitution or a constitutional amendment? And do you know what the process was to get that in?
I think it was an amendment. And look, Qatar is a monarchy. It'll be whatever the Emir of Qatar says it is.
Sure.
There's not due process here in the way that we would conventionally recognise it. Those two countries have done really well. We've also seen that outreach to Saudi Arabia, where they're getting F-35s as well. It's like Oprah. It's like, you get F-35s, and you get F-35s, and you get F-35s. And really, it does create this sort of strange instability around Israel, I think, because you're giving, Saudi are the best of a bad set of bedfellows in the Middle East. Stand fast UAE, but they're not really a major player. They're a subordinate player in this picture. Financially, yes, they're very wealthy and they have a lot of kind of business and trade go through there. But in terms of flexing muscle, they kind of follow where Saudi leads. So you have this kind of weird. Not the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's in the Middle East. The enemy of my enemy is also my enemy. But they're the best. They're the best of a bad bunch in Saudi. And MBS, for all his horrible track record in terms of dismembering journalists, Khashoggi, you might remember that. Sure. They are better than Qatar, they are better than Turkey, they are better than Iran, and they are the other player out of the four in the Middle East. And so they are the ones you probably would want to cozy up to. But going so far as to giving them that high-end tech is a really big deal because they also have really strong ties with China. Saudi certainly are not playing just one side. They are keeping their options open when it comes to, things like authoritarian regimes and when you rope in China, you rope in the rest of the axis, and it's all very complicated on a geopolitical level. So them getting F-35s is not as bad as Turkey getting F-35s, but it's still not where you'd want that to be if you were Israel, given that the F-35 particularly is what gave them that incredible edge over Iran. They wiped Russian air defenses, the S-300s, off the map without even taking a scratch. And for that technology now to be in the hands of some relatively ropey regimes that perhaps aren't as stable as you'd hope, particularly if you look at Saudi's finances, every dollar that comes off a barrel of oil puts Saudi really deep in a hole. Their budget does not balance at the moment. The low global oil prices are really, really hurting their long-term financial prospects. And when Saudis say they're going to invest $1 trillion in the US, look, that's the GDP for a year. That's not going to happen, you know.
Sure.
So that Mr. Trump is unfortunately incredibly prone to being played. As has been revealed by the Witkoff piece that emerged in the last 24 hours, where Witkoff was telling the Russians exactly how to play Trump, and it's flattering.
Yeah.
And that's what these countries are doing, and it's paying dividends for them, and that's not great news for Israel.
Yeah. I agree. I do have to say, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the QME. Of course, everybody is talking about this in the respect that these F-35s are going to be very downgraded versions. But I mean, as a layperson, an F-35 is an F-35. So you got a different computer. I still feel like there's enough of a threat there to still worry about. The other issue being that will take 5 to 7 years to deliver, and technology could come really far between here and there. I mean, who knows? Maybe Israel gets a B-2 bomber. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm just saying that this could cause like an insane arms race in just the Middle East in general. With the good actors, I put that in plural, even though there's really only one, Israel, and the bad. But Andrew, I have to say, so you and I always decide a few days in advance what we're gonna discuss at these impromptu conversations at the bar. This is the second week in a row that there's been like a major development on Sunday, which would have been the day before, that I had to like rethink all of my thoughts, because my thoughts can be a little crazy and sometimes they need calibration. So last week, of course, it was the surprise ratification of the Trump peace plan at the UN. I wasn't expecting that one. But this week, there were actually two earth-shaking events that happened on Sunday. One you already mentioned, and that was Trump's designation of the Muslim Brotherhood, or as we found out yesterday, at least certain chapters of it, as a terrorist organization. We could talk more about that or not. But first of all, by the way, why hasn't Israel designated the Muslim Brotherhood yet? I mean, now it seems like, okay, well, because Bibi is sort of baby Trump, he's like, oh, okay, we should probably do that, and they're getting the ball rolling. But it just seems like something that should have been done like before, say, the UAE did it, but whatever. Okay. But the second thing that happened on Sunday was I met on my long line of butchering names. I'm just going to go ahead and continue with the tradition. Luai al-Sharif. Is it Luai?
Yeah.
Okay. The guy. We all know the guy. He is amazing. So I'm not sure which of these events was more profound, but honestly, these two things are going to really color a lot of what I say today. I want to start with the big revelation, which actually came not from Trump, but from Luai. Luai?
I go with Luai, but you
Luai.
do you.
Okay. Me to me. Luai. Honestly, it was truly
He calls you
monumental.
Shamu.
Huh?
He calls you Shamu, so
Shamu. Do you know who Shamu is in California terms? Oh my God, that's so funny. The killer whale. Anyway, okay. You want to hear a fun fact? That's not fun at all.
Always.
The killer whales at SeaWorld die very early deaths, and the reason they do is from vertigo, from swimming in a small pool in the same circle their whole lives. They die very early. That's the fun fact. It's not fun. It's sad.
Die of busyness.
Yep. And there have been many Shamus. There are many Shamus. Shamu isn't a guy. It's a lot of guys. It's not me either.
Okay, come back out of the orca. Come back out of the orca hole. Come back out of it.
Backing out of the orca hole. Let's get back into the bar hole. So it turns out, I mean, maybe you knew that. I didn't know this, but that Luai is actually personal friends with MBS. Did you know that?
I knew he was connected. I didn't know he was that connected.
Okay. He says he says he knows him, his intention, and his motivations quite well. Okay. So, personally, being deeply skeptical of the Trump MBS cuddle session that we all witnessed last week, I asked Loy how sincere, um, at least he thought, MBS is in his reformation and his overtures towards the United States, the West, and yes, Israel. Andrew, I have to say, without missing like a nanobeat, he confirmed that he believes, he didn't even say, I believe, he just said that MBS is genuine in his commitment to fighting anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment in Saudi Arabia, and in his desire to join the Abraham Accords. I mean, he was so resolute when he said this. It really shifted something within me in a big way, especially vis-a-vis everything I was thinking about the airplanes. You probably don't call them airplanes, but that's what the Yogi calls them.
Fighter jets, whatever you want to call them.
Okay, I'll just call them airplanes.
Yep.
But by the way, I do want to add that the very fact that Mohammed bin Salman and Luai are friends, and Luai suffers no persecution or even censure for his very strong and vocal support of Israel, to me speaks volumes. I mean, this is a story that, of course, Jamal Khashoggi will not be able to break, but let's put that aside. It's not insignificant. If somebody in Gaza, for example, were to speak up the way that Luai does, they would be dead in 5 minutes. Or in Iran or Turkey, or, well, probably not Turkey, but any of the places. So that does say something when the most powerful person in the country more or less sanctions your pro-Israel stance. One more thing he stated that I know we all know to be true, but MBS could have whatever hopes for peace and rapprochement with Israel as he wants. And he even said it out loud, if I remember correctly, twice in the White House last week. But he faces like a Sisyphean uphill battle with his own citizenry. You like that? You like the Sisyphus analogy?
I do.
I'm amazed that I was able to pronounce that name. Let me just say, but every once in a while, I just whip out a name as if.
Okay, if we just stick to Greek mythology, you're golden.
Exactly. So the truth is, I don't know, how much throwing this bone to the Palestinians is going to change things, but he absolutely, for the sake of the street, had to insist. He really did not insist on a Palestinian state. He insisted on a pathway, right? Which, by the way, there has always been. Literally,
that's the insane thing,
always.
isn't it? It's
Okay.
insane when people talk, oh, we need a pathway. It's like dude, you've had that 6 times. You said
Right.
no every time.
But it's a good thing. It's a good thing because it allows actors like MBS to move forward because they made this public overture. They could say they did their due diligence. But as of this meeting that I had, not the meeting with Trump. I haven't met him yet. I am basically convinced, and I hope I'm not embarrassing myself by saying this, that MBS fully intends to be a true ally of the West, of America. And, monarchs and kings and leaders in the Middle East can sometimes have notoriously short lifespans for various reasons. But assuming that he lives a long and healthy life, he could, easily be in power in Saudi Arabia for the next 50 years or more. I think a lot can change as far as modernization, tolerance, and he could have like a tremendous forward-looking effect for generations to come. And it's going to take generations of reprogramming. But it sounds to me like he's sincere and being on board. And keep in mind one more thing. If it takes 7 years to get a jet, and they're saying we want to normalize with Israel, but not at this moment, my bet is that it comes within 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the motivations are always slightly opaque when it comes to the Gulf. I mean, there is a huge
Sure.
financial motivation behind this, whether it's through altruism or finance. Either way, it probably works out as a good thing. But, there's that famed energy pipeline from Saudi through to Israel, through to, I think, Greece is the most likely kind of route into Europe at this point. I know Israel and Greece are getting very tight. And there is obviously a huge amount of sun in Saudi Arabia. There is also a huge drive globally away from oil. And I've already mentioned what oil price drops do to, sorry, my dogs are fighting, what oil price drops do to Saudi's economy. And so there is also a fragility with modernizing Arab leaders. There's a real pattern of these sort of Islamic countries going really liberal and coming way back the other way. And we're seeing that happening in Turkey right now. If we think back to the Ataturk era and how liberal and kind of free that country was, how it's now going down this kind of Islamist spiral. That is a pattern that happens often. Look at Iran, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so MBS will have one eye to history, one eye to the future, I think. And actually, as long as the end result is that deal that kind of ties it closer to Israel, be that through the Abraham Accords or be that just through a bilateral arrangement, it can only be a good thing. And like I say, if you're looking at the big four players in the Gulf, Saudi is definitely the one that you want in bed with you rather than any of the other three. So, I'm slightly more skeptical as to motive, perhaps, than Loai is, or indeed you are, as a new Saudi convert. But there are a number of factors playing into this that are all pointing in the right direction more broadly. So no bad thing.
Yeah, I think that.
But I still think it's far too soon to be throwing F-35s at them. But that's just me being the cynical pessimist that I always am.
Well, when I'm president, none of them is going to get F-35s other than Israel. But until then, we could only do what we can do and hope for the best, I guess. But I have to say that I've been talking for decades about energy independence. And I can tell you as an American, and as somebody who really does care about animals and the environment. I mean, I'm a vegan because I love animals so much. I hope you watched that dog thing that I sent you yesterday because it was so amazing. But I understand the conflict with drilling and what it means for the environment, but I also know that energy independence is literally what could cripple the Middle East ultimately. Now, that being said, I would say that our real problem right now lies in physics, and the solution lies in geology. The problem that's physics is that money makes the world go round. And if we turn off the spigot, particularly
Is that
from
physics or
Qatar,
economics?
yes. If we turn off the spigot, particularly from Qatar, the world will stop spinning, okay? We all fly off, and that's pretty much the end of everything. This is the problem. Here's the solution. The solution is that Middle Eastern oil reserves won't last forever, okay? If tech moves quickly enough, I mean, we could even end energy independence faster than that. But let's assume, because of oil lobbies and all the things, that we are oil dependent to the last drop. I just want to take a quick note to our favorite person, Greta Thunberg, who insisted for so many years that we would be out of oil by 2030, which is in like 4 years. Even 2050 24 years, it's not going to happen. That narrative has honestly completely died in the pipeline. However, it does look like these reserves will probably dry up in the Middle East between about 100 and 150 years. That's even longer than after Trump's third term.
Even longer than you've been alive.
And while I'm joking about that, or I mean, at least I'm sort of joking about that. As ridiculous as it sounds, though, this is the long game that we keep talking about that the Muslim Brotherhood is playing. They don't think in terms of presidential terms the way we do. Like just yesterday, you're like, the next administration, that's in 3 years. And that's how far we're thinking. And we're like, oh my God, 3 years. Like in the Western terms, that seems like forever. In Muslim Brotherhood terms, it's the blink of an eye. And if we're going to get serious about taking them seriously, we need to start thinking along these timelines. 100 years may seem ridiculous. We need 100-year plan.
Which is so hard to do in a democracy, because look how your president's going to be he's going to be a lame duck in 1 year if the midterms go the way they look like they're going to go. And then you have a 2-year hiatus where you can't get anything done. That's really, really challenging. And I think Saudi are thinking long term as well. I mean, Bahrain is already dry. It's the first post-oil Gulf state, and they get gifted 90% of their GDP by Saudi. So there is a model here as to what this looks like in the Middle East if you don't do something after oil, and it's Bahrain, and it doesn't look good. So I have absolutely no doubt that MBS has his eye on that, and that's why I suggest that it's not from altruism and a love of Israel; it's from financial expediency and a desire not to have his modernizing drive in Saudi Arabia to be overthrown by a much more hardline element. And it's, of course, that's why he has to play it so clever with the Palestine issue, because the Muslim Arab street is so anti-Israel now. They've been bombarded with genocide allegations for 2 years. I've said it before, but I've been on Egyptian television. I was on once and it was fine. I was on a second time and I have refused to go on there since, because first of all, they had one of the UK's premier anti-Semites on just before me.
Who's that?
I have not got liability that covers that. So
okay. Does he or she have the initials JC?
JC, no.
Okay.
It's a former academic who lost his job for anti-Semitism, which shows you how bad it is. For him to lose his job in the UK for that is really going some. But yeah, he was on there spouting his bullshit to start with, and then they went to a bit of a talking head piece before me, and they were just talking about the genocide in Gaza. Not up for debate. It's just a thing that's happening. And it was a really good indication as to where that goes. And it's the same. I've done Iraqi television as well. And it was not as bad, but nearly as bad. And that's what the Muslim Arab street has been bombarded with for 2 years. And I think if Saudi were to normalize with Israel tomorrow, then, that would be, potentially the end of the bin Salman regime in Saudi. So he has to be very, very careful with that. And as you said, he's thinking long term. He's thinking post fossil fuels. He's thinking where do we go? Especially given that they are already struggling with oil prices. So yeah, he's not a stupid guy, and it's just a different way of looking at the world and a freedom that comes from an authoritarian dictatorship, which is what they ultimately are.
Do you think that this is... So I'm curious from a military perspective, because of course I have my own personal opinions. Do you think this is why they ensured that he got civilian nuclear permission from Trump? Do you think that his intentions really are like, we need to diversify away from oil, or do you think this is the beginning of a nuclear arms race in the Middle East?
It's a tough question. That's a tough question. Look, these things are closely monitored. Saudi do not have a tradition or a history of military aggression.
Mhm.
There may be a mutually assured destruction aspect with Iran, but you can't really count on that because that didn't stop them with Israel. There's as someone's just said in the comments, who said that, Sarah just said, they are trying to clean up their PR act, like they're buying Newcastle United Football Club, what we call sports washing. They're making genuine efforts, I think, to tidy that up. That would be heavily undermined by some sort of covert nuclear program that wouldn't stay covert for very long. So, I don't have any concrete kind of evidence, but based on a bit of reasoning and a little bit of gut, I would suggest it probably is power rather than anything else.
Okay.
I'd be genuinely surprised if Saudi made a rush for a nuclear bomb.
Well, does it have to be a rush? I mean, if the thought is, Andrew, that Iran is a bad actor, they've essentially left the nuclear proliferation agreement, though I'm very unclear about this because they did send in the letter. They have not been cooperating, and yet they are apparently begging the Trump White House for a deal, and now the IAEA is saying they want to go in. So they're sort of in, I guess, this netherworld of nuclear limbo. But should they rush for the bomb? Do you not think that maybe Saudis are like, just in case, we should probably have our ducks in a row?
Yeah, maybe, but look, it's all about the processing of the uranium. For a nuclear power plant, it's a way lower percentage that you need to process to get to
Sure.
to get to a nuclear thing. When you start going well above that, there are monitoring systems that would be tracking stuff like that. It would come to prominence pretty quickly, and then the question why gets asked very quickly, and it all gets very awkward. So right now, no, would be my take. But of course, if we're thinking in 100-year schedules, it certainly does make sense to have not even the option on the table, but the option of the option.
I did hear, though, that what Trump agreed to was the model wherein all of the nuclear power is imported and that they don't have actual enrichment capabilities on site.
I mean, I wasn't tracking that detail. In that case, it's a definite no, because you can't make a bomb unless you can enrich. Unless you've got centrifuges to enrich, which is what Trump knocked out in Iran.
Knocked out.
Well, for 3 years, to put them back 3 years tops.
Hopefully.
Well, that's the Israeli estimate, and that's from a pretty solid source in Israel. They think 3.
Okay.
So unless you've got those centrifuges, you ain't making nothing. So I think that probably answers the question.
Okay.
Yeah, you're more across the detail on that nuclear deal than I am. That's not something I've been digging into recently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just anytime I see the word nuclear, my sirens start going off, and I start digging in. So, but I think that there's so much that hasn't exactly been disclosed, and that literally, Andrew, tell me if you agree or disagree. Every time I hear the word Axios, I'm like, okay, that's just going to be some sort of lie or propaganda. Automatically, I believe that it's some fake leak. So I don't really know what to believe or not to believe anymore. But that is what I heard about the nuclear.
Fair enough. We've got a question. Do you think a Ukraine peace deal would affect the situation in the Middle East, or is Russia too fragile to have an impact? Look, Russia's out of the game financially for a while. It depends a lot on what the deal looks like when it comes to lifting of sanctions and the return of Russia to the world economic stage. But it's still going to take some time to pull back from this. But they're on a war footing now. They are all, they're gangbusters going for, a huge increase in their military. The war in Ukraine doesn't stop there unless Mr. Trump gets this right. And at the moment, it looks like he's going to get it horribly, horribly wrong. He is treating Russia as a fair actor that's genuine in its motivations, and clearly it is none of those things. And I genuinely don't know how you get to the level of ignorance in the White House and the Trump administration that thinks that Russia is a fair actor here. You must be coming into this as if you've been on Mars for 20 years, and you know nothing about Russia whatsoever.
Right.
It's like find me a Russia expert, a fair Russia expert that doesn't think then they're insane and have ambitions, sort of revanchist ambitions to reclaim their influence in Eastern Europe and near abroad. Yes, a lot of those experts were wrong and didn't think they'd go as far as they did. Myself included on that one. Not that I'm an expert, but certainly I'm an observer of such things. And I was working at Sandhurst at the time, and I had colleagues who were absolute experts with PhDs in this stuff who didn't think they were going to roll into Ukraine, and they did. But yeah, like how you get to the point where you think, yeah, Russia will stick to that deal is just beyond me. But then again, this is the same guy that thought Hamas would stick to the deal and thinks that Jelani is a guy that's worth doing business with. And I was speaking to someone this week about what's going on with Hamas in Syria, and it's not good. There's camps in the Sueda region, a huge amount of arms being collated there. I would be astonished if we didn't see Israeli airstrikes in those locations in the near future. But obviously, Trump is still holding this whole thing in balance by force of will right now.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly fragile situation still, and I think there's a lot of kind of two things here. There's the one side of the argument when it comes to Israel, who are like, Israel's screwed. They're completely isolated. They're screwed. And then there's the other side, which goes, yeah, they've just had a huge military victory. Everything is going to be rosy. Everyone's going to be signing the Abraham Accords, and Israel is now going to be a regional powerhouse. I don't think either of those are true. I think what we are in a situation now is one where there are an incredible number of variables. Hezbollah is a variable. What's going on in Iran is a variable. Syria is a variable. The international isolation is absolutely a variable. What Saudi does next when it comes to relations with Israel is a variable. Who wins the midterms is a variable. Who wins the next presidency is a variable. Like anyone who tells you they know exactly where this is going to go or what the future looks like is selling you snake oil.
Sure.
Because if there is a thinker in the world who can come up with where this goes in an accurate prediction, than they are in one in a million.
When you bring up Syria, let's add in the fact that they are the third country that was left out of this Muslim Brotherhood declaration. But I do want to just really quickly, I do want to say something about the timing. That it was the day after his meeting with Mamdani that he announces that the Muslim Brotherhood is now going to be designated as a terrorist organization. Now, I think that as cringy and that romantic meeting felt like, there's also this theory of, keep your friends closer. I keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. The fact that the next day he's like, yeah, let's designate the Muslim Brotherhood. Do you know who was the number one institutional backer for Mamdani's campaign?
It was CAIR, wasn't it?
Well, sort of. So CAIR has this weird political action committee that legally they're not allowed to be a part of, but it happens to be at the same exact address. It is called the Unity and Justice Fund PAC, and they're the ones who gave Mamdani all their money. And by the way, they and CAIR are both affiliates of the Muslim Brotherhood. To me, this seems like a smoking, what would it be? Like an AK-47? Hello! Like a smoke. Hi! AK-47. I just this is so obvious. And I think that, Trump is going to be able to hold this over Mamdani's head if Mamdani does not take a knee. But I just want to say something about the Russia-Ukraine thing. I am by no stretch of the imagination an expert on this. In fact, as a yoga person, I could tell you that when I say no stretch, I really mean no stretch. I'm not an expert, but I can say that when it comes to at least what I understand about this proposed ceasefire is I think that we are setting a very, very, very dangerous precedent. And so when we say, how's it going to affect the Middle East? I think it's going to affect the Middle East, if nothing else, in this. Now we have both Israel and Ukraine that, for the most part, were forced to sign deals that are in favor of the evil actor. That does not bode well for the future of democracy or humankind, as far as I'm concerned.
This boils down to one question: is something worth fighting for or not? There's this sort of strange kind of uber pacifism in the Trump White House. I don't know. It's because there's an old saying that you can tell a lot about a man's insecurities by the things he holds in contempt. Obviously, Trump, a famed draft dodger for Vietnam, and I don't know if that's sort of given him a lifelong insecurity and therefore a contempt for the profession of arms and for for war generally. I mean, that said, he was meant to be the peace president. He's fired more missiles in his first year than Biden did in his entire term. So there's a sort of contradiction there. But he certainly has this strange thing that like all wars are bad, just stop them immediately. And like some things are worth fighting for. I think that's why I joined the army. I thought, it turns out I got sent to fight in a war that wasn't worth fighting. But that's by the by. My intentions were pure, even if my government got it wrong, and yours indeed. But look, some things are worth fighting for. And do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in sovereignty? Do we believe in, the world order as has served us so well for centuries, if not post 1945? The Westphalian order. Do we believe that countries should be free to make their own decisions? Do we believe that borders should be inviolable? Is this something worth fighting for or not? I think it is. And that's what Ukraine's fighting for. And stand fast the corruption piece. And of course, Eastern Europe is famously corrupt. Generally, all the ex-Soviet states are. It's kind of a feature, not a bug. If you're going to hold Ukraine accountable, you need to start looking at a lot of other countries in Eastern Europe as well, and probably Western Europe as well, if we're being brutally honest. But stand fast all that stuff. Like they were invaded by an aggressor that has committed monstrous war crimes. Absolutely monstrous massacres in places like Bucha and Mariupol, the abduction of thousands of Ukrainian children. And then not only that, but then placing them in kind of reprocessing camps. And those ones that have been returned can't even speak Ukrainian anymore because of the brainwashing camps they've been sent to. And that's before you get what he's done to his own people, where he's, sending waves of humans to go and get mowed down by the Ukrainians. Getting African soldiers in on false pretenses and then firing them over to the front. They have behaved in an utterly monstrous manner for 3 years. And that's worth fighting against. Like hell, we sent a generation to war in 1939 to fight essentially this kind of idea. Nazi. I'm not saying that Putin's a Nazi, because let's not be lazy with our designations, but he's certainly a completely malign dictator with no respect for humanity or the rule of law or anything like that. And yet Trump is treating him as an interlocutor, and there should just be an end to the war, and that's that. And it just doesn't sit right with me. I think some things are worth fighting for. Ukraine is one of them. And, I've been on the front lines in Ukraine, like right on the front lines. I've been to a battalion in contact. It's about as far forward as you can reasonably get without picking up a rifle. And, I've seen these guys firsthand. I know they're not Nazis. I know they are warriors. I know they are fighting for a cause they believe in. They want to keep fighting. The morale is there. Certainly the ones I spoke to. Clearly, that not everyone, because they do have desertion issues, and they've been at war a long time, and there is war fatigue. But it doesn't take away from the fundamental principle that some things are worth fighting for, and that's one of them. And yet Trump doesn't seem to have any kind of that idea doesn't even register with him, which is bizarre, because America has been the leader of the free world for decades, since since the end of since 1945 onwards. America has always been that shining light that gave that leadership to the world. Financially did incredibly well out of it as well. That's as an aside. But this is not a concept that Mr. Trump seems to have any understanding of, other than what can he get out of it. And it doesn't sit right with me at all.
I feel like Donald Trump is, I mean, everybody knows he always wants a deal, but in so doing, I feel like he never wants to offend anyone. He wants to be everyone's friend, which is so funny, because I would think he would want to be everyone's
He doesn't seem
enemy.
to want to be Ukraine's friend.
Yeah, well, but he's made certain overtures to Ukraine as well. He's always waffling. I'll tell you something so interesting, Andrew. In 2020, 2020? Wait, when was no 2016? When he was running for president, right? He came to APAC policy conference because all the presidential candidates who aren't Bernie Sanders do. And they did like massive damage control before he came. We had 20,000 people, and they're like, there were planned protests. It was in the news. People were going to walk out. They were going to shout. They were going to put out banners, all the things. And for days, for 2 or 3 days before he came, he comes on Tuesday. The policy conference starts on Sunday. They kept telling us, you need to respect all guests, right? They're guests in our home. You need to respect them. You don't have to like what they say. You just have to respect them, blah, blah, blah. I mean, nonstop for days. Andrew, he walked into what was then the Verizon Center to such a hostile crowd. By the middle of the speech, he had an ovation that I have never seen for anyone except for maybe Nikki Haley or Bibi himself at some point in decades of going to these conferences. By the end, we could not get off our feet. He had won over this entire arena. And here's the reason I want to bring this up. And sorry, I'm totally changing course here, but just riffing on what you're saying about like who are his friends. And I'm going to go back to the Mamdani thing. When I saw him sitting there next to Mamdani standing there, which was amazing. We got to keep in mind that was a power play right there. Mamdani, I have to say, he's just like, that's fine, I'll stand. Like, he really did play it off. And the way that he was so non-reactive to the fact that he was being subjugated, in a way, humiliated, and he held himself, all I kept thinking was, we have two players who are playing the player. It was surreal to watch this whole thing. But when you say that some things are worth fighting for, that, of course, I have to go. I know we're talking about Ukraine and Russia here. Can I just go back to Israel for a moment? You know, Trump overall, and in like him or hate him, he has done some extraordinary things for Israel, and he's made some very, very, very strident statements about Israel, about their right to fight, about destroying Hamas, about all the things. But as I was listening to the press conference, which I listened to a few times over, and all I heard, because I had to listen to it multiple times, so I'm like, am I just like not paying enough attention? Because all I heard was like, blah, 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 genocide, blah, 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 violating international law, blah, blah, blah. And you can say perhaps that I'm like the slightest bit biased in my analysis, but between
No, that's a foul calumny.
between all like this blah blah blahness, there were some like seriously disturbing statements. Like, first, both Mamdani and Trump, which pissed me off, either diverted or ignored every question about Israel or the Jews of New York or whatever, anti-Semitism. A Mamdani response about ending forever wars, never mind why we have forever wars with terrorists. Okay, let's just put that aside. Or ending taxpayer dollars going to fund the violation of human rights. All of these statements just quickly morphed into solving the cost of living crisis. As Trump just sat there and nodded his head and smiled, and he's like, yeah, we all want to solve the cost of living crisis. And it was like Mamdani, as of course he would, took this gratuitous like genocide stab. He had to get that in with exactly zero pushback from Trump. Okay, now I took this issue up with Thane Rosenbaum on my show about Vance, with the whole like shit show of a Turning Point event where he pushed back on none of the deeply anti-Semitic tropes and silence his complicity. So when Trump just sat there, when he's like, well, there's a genocide, in Trump's like, okay. And then Mamdani immediately pivots back to affordability, right? And so this strategy of offhandedly like slipping these anti-Semitic slurs and tropes into like seemingly civil discourse it's just a way to further normalize Jew hatred and anti-Israel sentiment in the popular narrative. This is like the open source version of subliminal messaging. And I just I could go on. I did a whole episode on the Yoga Vor yesterday, a commentary about the whole Nefesh B'Nefesh thing. So I'm not going to reiterate it here, but it really did frighten me the way that no matter what ulterior motives Trump may have with Mamdani, the fact that, I mean, at one point he said, like, oh, the guy's got some kooky ideas, whatever. He always has to, in some way, insult whoever's in front of him. But Mamdani was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm kooky. The next day he went on TV and said, yeah, Trump is a despot. I don't go back on anything I say. Like, nothing really changed. These are two players, again, just playing the player. And I just can't wait to see what happens when Trump gets slapped with his rich white man tax bill. Because I have a feeling that besides not paying it, this Muslim Brotherhood thing may come to the surface with Mamdani.
Yeah, he knows. And look, I've said it all along, Donald Trump's just in it for Israel. He's in it for Israel to benefit himself. I don't believe for a second that he is a diehard Zionist. He's just got a constituency that he thinks he can get something out of domestically. So I'm incredibly skeptical. And I think what you said kind of reinforces my point, if anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure he got a standing ovation at APAC. He plays a crowd better than anyone, frankly. The guy is an incredible populist orator. He knows exactly the right thing to say to the right audience. But yeah, I retain my skepticism about his support for Israel, and I think Israel goes on if it suits Donald Trump. But on that note, I have to bring things to a conclusion because I have to go to the train station. So I'm going to make my move at this point. But thank you, everyone, for listening in. Appreciate, as ever, that you take time out of your day to come and listen to us rattling on. Hopefully you got something interesting out of it and you enjoyed the conversation, and we will do the same thing again next week. Shana.
Thank you. Once again, I want to quickly end by saying that I hope that everyone will maybe take 5 minutes to read my most recent Substack post, which is called "And Then There Were Three." Yesterday, the remains of Dror Or were returned to Israel for burial. So, to be honest, now there are two. But Hamas is not only violating the terms of the agreement that they signed, but they are playing some sick lottery or Russian roulette with the remaining two hostage families' emotions and sanity. Rangavili and Suristak Rintalak are yet to come home. Please keep your dog tags and ribbons on. We can't rest until they can rest in peace.
Cool.
Just my older brother.
Oh, he says that every week. But yeah, please do, if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, please do like, subscribe. Obviously, go to Shana's Substack, give her a follow. And if you follow me, then thank you very much. It's much appreciated. And we will see you next week. But for now, it's a big cheers from me.
And L'chaim from Los Angeles. Andrew, I'll see you next week.
Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.